And we're live.
Hello, and welcome to the Modern Romantic Podcast, where we celebrate romanticism through many creative outlets and passionate people doing some amazing thing. Hello, it's me. Hi, I'm Trey. You can
Thank
find me.
you.
It is. You can find me at OrpheTunes on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm joined by my co-host Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hi. Can I have your autograph?
Maybe later. Uh,
I know you get hounded all the time.
all the time, I gotta beat the people off from demanding my autograph. Uh, well, someone who we have on the podcast here today, I know people have asked for their autograph, and I probably will at some point because they've been very influential for things that I've watched in my lifetime. Emily, would you like to introduce our amazing guest today?
Yes, today we have an award-winning educator and filmmaker, someone who is a director, producer, writer, and now author and novelist, Tom Blomquist. Yay!
Ah!
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here with you guys. I've really been looking forward to this.
Oh, good.
Good.
We're excited too. Thank you for coming on.
Well, people that do stuff like I do and like what your guests do, it does come from a passion, and you're doing this for a passion, through a passion, and we love talking about it. I mean, it's not just enough to do it. Sometimes you just need to talk about it and share it and exchange ideas about it. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're hoping we inspire some people too, because not everybody knows how to jump in, or at least how to get started, or have the guts to do it. And being told that you can, and being told that you can by people who do, is powerful. So,
Well, I understand that. And the truth is, nobody needs permission to try to channel their creativity. What do you mean permission? It's like, just try it, have fun. This is supposed to be fun.
yeah.
In the arts, whether you're, writing short stories and poems at home or writing journaling, and nobody in the world's ever going to see it, or you're going to be a famous novelist or screenwriter or something, or a sculptor. Doesn't matter what level it is. It's the doing it that is and the completing it that is the satisfaction. And I tell people that all the time. So what if you write a screenplay and it doesn't make $10 million at the studios and it becomes a mega hit? That's not why you write this stuff. You write it because you want to, you have to. It's like, gotta sing, gotta dance, gotta do, have to get it out. And then and you complete it, and it's so satisfying, even if it's terrible. You did it. It's something you did. And if it's any good, or you get feedback and then the next one's maybe a little more accomplished, then all the better. But nobody needs permission. Anybody that has told you, somebody watching this or listening to this, that they needed permission, shame on them, because that's not what this is about.
Right. Take this as your permission if you need it, but definitely just go do. I love that. That is something that I hear often, that people just needed to hear that they could, and I'm like, but you can tell yourself that too.
It's in my own career, starting, I really wanted to be a TV writer, and I went through a lot of steps to get from Chicago to Los Angeles to become one, and then finally got to be one. There were a lot of steps along the way, a lot of different experiences. And throughout that journey, there were doors that closed on me. You're not good enough, you're not ready enough, they won't return your calls, you name it. There are a lot of reasons people say no. There are very few reasons people say yes in the commercial sphere of just the arts. You could be, I know writers, trust me when I say I know writers that were better than me, more accomplished than me creatively, who never sold a word, never made a dime. I don't know why it didn't happen for them. Happened for me. I don't know why. Luck, maybe. Maybe I stuck it out longer than they did. But the truth is, there's always somebody very happy to say no. Always somebody. We call him Dr. No, in the writing world. There's always a Dr. No in the room. We go, I don't know,
Sure.
Trey, that story, I don't know. I think that works. And then you're done. And it's like, but. And it's learning to navigate around. You can't argue with them. Say, okay, well, thank you very much. And then you try to figure out, okay, what did I not say to turn that no into a maybe, or possibly even a yes? Because it's a lot harder for someone to say yes to you, a lot more risk for them, than it is for somebody to say no. It's very easy to say no. You say no all day long, and everybody thinks you have very high standards, and you're impossibly, talented because you say no to everybody. On the other hand, for somebody to say yes to you, yes, I really like that. Yes to that idea of yours. Let's go with that. They're putting something of themselves on the line, sometimes a lot of self on the line. And if it doesn't work, then they look foolish, and people start wondering, well, do I have the right executive in that job, or the right person in that position? And so they have a lot of incentive to say no. And you have to kind of slowly claw your way around and through all of that until somebody says yes, and then you go take it from there.
That's a tough business.
Yeah, it is. And all the arts are that way.
Yeah.
I mean, dancers and certainly friends of mine in the music business, this is not a instant gratification world if you want to do it professionally and commercially. If you want to do it for fun, you can be the person doing paintings and being at the local art fair on the weekends, and those people are very happy because they're doing art, they're selling art, they're with other artists, they're with the public, and that's a great place to be emotionally. It's when you're like trying to pay your mortgage with that and raise a family or whatever, then it gets a little stickier.
Right. Now, you mentioned Chicago. I'm going to take this wild risk and guess that you're actually from Sugar Grove, Illinois.
No, I'm not, but I know who you guys are.
The Julie Montague episode. I was like, wouldn't it be wild if he was?
There are laws that keep me from going to Sugar Grove. I'm from Mount Prospect.
Okay.
Northwest suburb near Arlington Heights, where the Arlington racetrack will be. So that's up where I'm from. Went to school in Southern Illinois, go Salukis. And then eventually worked at an ad agency in Chicago, and then moved a couple of years out of college to Los Angeles to try this writing thing and producing thing that I got into.
Did you go like in an ad agency sort of like mentality, or were you going to just make a break for writing for entertainment?
Well, it's sequential. When I was in college, my training was as a producer director, doing like live TV, newscasts and talk shows and things, that kind of directing. And by my sophomore year, I saw where my predecessors were all kind of the jobs they were getting. They were getting great jobs at TV stations all around the Midwest as producer directors. And I realized, I don't think I want to do that. I like TV commercials. I want to be the guy producing those commercials. So I started trying to figure out, how do I go from this program I'm in to one of the big ad agencies? And I was writing letters, and I wrote 80 letters to ad agencies all over the world saying, here's who I am, here's where I'm going to school. It was a top tier school in those days for radio television. And, I know you recruit people right out of school. What do I have to do to be one of those guys? And a couple of people wrote me back, nice try, kid, goodbye, thank you. But I got a very warm, encouraging note from an executive at Foot Cone and Belding in Chicago. And we developed a correspondence over several years. And ultimately, that led to a job at Foot Cone and Belding. But it wasn't making commercials. It was working on their Hallmark greeting cards account on the Hallmark Hall of Fame dramas that they did then on NBC, now CBS. And so they were doing 4 or 5 TV movies a year all over the world. And I didn't realize it, but my boss, the executive producer, Dwayne Bogey, was looking for a protege to kind of train to be him, be another producer. Mm-hmm. And of course, like a lightning bolt came down and hit me plucked me out of obscurity and put me in a completely different path, because now I'm reading all these scripts and novels and plays being submitted. We got like 500 submissions a year for 4 movies. And so I'm reading all this stuff, and I'm reading spec scripts from Norman Mailer and Arthur Miller submitted a spec script to us, for God's sake, trying to get a Hallmark Hall of Fame made. And I realized I don't want to be the guy making the commercials that go into these shows. I want to be the guy writing these shows. And that's where I steered my thinking around and realized I have a lot of learning to do. And I started writing screenplays and trying to figure out, how do I get from here, Michigan Avenue, to, Los Angeles. And it took a while, but I got there and slugged it out.
What, I do have to ask, what is the craziest submission that you've ever gotten while you were in that position?
Craziest submission?
Yes.
Well, it's been a long time, so you have to, it's not just my old age and my mental defects that are at work there. It's I have to think back. This kind of goes across all submissions in any kind of, whether I was producing TV shows on the network or not. But inevitably, you get things from people and wonder, have you ever seen this show? Do you ever is this something you've never watched? And because they will submit things with a straight face and an earnest passion, and it doesn't resemble anything that you have ever done, would ever do. And you wonder, what are you smoking or drinking? Because, and we got those on Hallmark, really, horror films. Well, Hallmark is not going to do a horror film for their Easter or Christmas greeting card season. It's just not going to work. So it's amazing what desperation will do, whether it's an agent or a writer or a producer trying to get something made. And when I was producing network, primetime shows, same thing. So a writer would come in, they really work hard to fight to get a meeting. They come in to pitch a story. And then you're sitting there with your jaw on the floor going, are you sure you're in the right room? Have you ever seen this show? You don't even know what you're talking about. This has nothing to do. You'd be like pitching a Star Trek episode to Murder, She Wrote. It's like, what? That kind of thing. And it is amazing. And for anybody out there who has done that, and I'm sorry if it offends you, but it's like, you do have to kind of, in the professional sphere, you have to know your audience. You have to know the show. You have to know the metabolism of what it is they do. Whether it's if you're pitching a Lifetime movie, well, okay, Lifetime movies tend to have a formula, a certain pattern of storytelling. It works for them. That's why it's a pattern of storytelling. So your job is not to reinvent their storytelling and to come up with a whole new concept that they've never thought of before. Your job is to take your idea and have it fit into their formula or format of storytelling, because the we all get comfortable watching these shows, right? If you watch a Lifetime movie, you kind of know what it's going to be, and you can settle in on your couch and you can watch it, and you're comfortable with the fact that it's going to be reminiscent of the other ones that you've seen. And if you're going to, whether it's an episode of Hawaii Five-0, well, you kind of know what it is. And they don't want to do a time travel episode on Hawaii Five-0. So you have to do stories that they would do in the way they do them, utilizing their characters, not bringing in all your own original wonderful characters. You say that for, and that's the other thing. I've and all my writer friends that are watching this or will ever see this will know that we've done TV series. Somebody will come in and they'll pitch a story, and it's like about a character who comes to town, and it's all about that character. It's like, yeah, but we have 4 series regulars, and the audience is watching them every week. We don't care about your brilliant new character. That might be a guest star character, but the story can't be all about them, revolve around them, be driven by them. It's got to be about Magnum PI or whoever that's why people, they want to see, well, what kind of trouble is he going to get into this week? And how is he going to get out of trouble this week? And that's why they're fun, because we get invested in a very unique way. in primetime series or sitcoms. You're going to do Big Bang Theory when it was on. Well, they had a certain way they did those shows, the way they serviced each of those characters, and they don't want you to come in with some new character and have them take over the show because the audience won't stand for it.
No.
They want to see their people.
Yeah, the people who are already beloved by the audience.
It's a long answer to your question, Trey, but the fact is you do get these weird change-up things that happen, and you do sit back and go, what? You want to do what? But it is universal. Every show, every one of my producer friends, we've all had the same experience. It's like, this can't possibly be what you're seriously proposing, because there's no way this could ever work.
And that's kind of, for me, so let me preface this by saying that my mom loved television programming from the late 50s, early 60s, early 70s. Sure. And so I was always the kid who would stay up late at night and watch Nick at Night with her, because that's where I could intake a lot of those shows under syndication. But that's also where I started getting introduced to things like J.B. Fletcher with
Murder, She Wrote. Yeah.
Thank you, Murder, She Wrote. And specifically with Murder, She Wrote, thinking back to some of the plot lines for Murder, She Wrote, I have to go, what were did they get submissions for some of those episodes, or was that actually like the creation of the writers? Because some of those episodes were a little out there, and I was not expecting those.
No, they back in that era, up through the early 2000s, TV shows relied very heavily on freelance writers. And so if you were a showrunner, which is the executive producer, showrunner, or a senior level producer person, they had a small staff, maybe a story editor, a producer, and an executive producer. Well, they couldn't possibly write all 22 episodes. So you wanted freelancers, you needed them to come in and pitch stories to you. And the value of that is you get to meet all these cool new writers, and you get new ideas and fresh approaches to what it is you're doing. And then you work with them on shaping how the story would work and how it's all going to go. Over time, that changed, and shows became more staff written. So they would bring 3, 4, 5, 6 writers on at the beginning of the season, and they would each write 2 or 3 episodes, and there's your whole series. So you didn't. Right now, I don't know how, frankly, a lot of new TV writers change how they connect, because they don't get a chance to audition for them by writing a script and having it go well and then being brought on. I would sometimes hire a writer and say, we loved your script. Would you like to do 3 or 4 of these for us? And they were still freelancers, but they could work at home. They could come in. We'd meet, talk, go to lunch, and it was a really fun way to work. And so on Murder, She Wrote and all those shows, I did an episode for them, and I was brought in. They said, hey, we know your work. We have an opening, want to come in. And we worked very hard on a story that the producers liked this episode idea. We just couldn't together figure out how to make it work for Murder, She Wrote. And the way her character has to interact with the other characters, who the villain is and how she solves crimes, mine was a little out there. And we knew it. It was what we call a change-up episode, and we just couldn't lick it together. Like 3 very experienced writers sitting in a room for days and days trying to figure it out. And ultimately, we just all said, you know what, this doesn't work for the show, and it didn't work, and that was the end of it. But they worked very well. Angela's brother, Bruce Lansbury, was one of the writer-producers on the show, and in fact, the reason I knew them is that I had hired him to write an episode of a show that I had done previously, and I really enjoyed him. And what an elegant, talented, good guy. And he did a great episode for us. And so I think maybe as a thank you, he said, hey, come on in, and my sister's got this show. And we tried real hard to make it work. And ultimately, if you've done this a few times, you say, we can't make this square peg fit in the round hole. It can't be done. And we walked away from it together. But I loved working with them, and I wish I had been able to do the show, because I still watch them sometimes late at night when I can't sleep. I'm looking around. Oh, there's Murder She Wrote. No, that and Columbo. I used to get caught up in those as well.
Yes. I mean, between that and like Magnum PI, and then we would watch, like, I think when I turned 7 or 8 is when Nick and Knight acquired the rights to start broadcasting the A-Team. And that's
Right.
when I first got introduced to Mr. T. And my mom kept quoting me until that point, like, I pity the fool. Though she would do it in, like, not in that tone of voice, she'd do it much higher. And I'd be a little concerned if my mom could get down to that register.
Honestly, I've typed those words. I pity the fool. Because
That's awesome.
I wrote an episode in the 3rd season. I was working for the Stephen J. Cannell company, and Steve Cannell was the most prolific TV writer of the era, and he created the A-Team and Riptide to Hardcastle McCormick and Hunter and Greatest American Hero and Wise Guy and all these great shows. And so to get in that company was a real thrill. And I was producing Riptide at one end of the hall, and 4 doors down, the guys that were doing the A-Team had a script that was not working for whatever reason. And they said, hey, why don't you do one of these? So over a couple of weekends, I wrote my first episode for them. While I was producing Riptide, I wrote an episode for them, and it was well received. So a year or 2 later, when my show was canceled, they said, why don't you come over and produce A-Team? So I did the last season of A-Team as the writer-producer. And so I got a chance to write those words. And I will tell you that any professional writer would be lying if they said they didn't immediately revert to their 10-year-old self when they get to write iconic lines. I also wrote for a show, Freddy Krueger series called Freddy's Nightmares, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 seasons of that, and I wrote like 4 of them. And it's showtime. To write a Freddy Krueger line, you can't not be a 10-year-old boy,
sure,
giggling to yourself because it's so fun. And in fact, the novel I'm writing right now is about screenwriters, and so we're all a little nuts, and I'll admit, and eccentric, maybe is a more elegant way to say it. The truth is, these characters are real. Just as actors, good actors, don't act, they become the character. And in one form or another, whatever their training, they're not posing, they transform into a different human being. Sometimes it even changes the way their face works and their body language. It's amazing. Well, writers do all of that as well. When you're in the zone and you're writing for real, you're not pretending. You don't just sit and say, okay, let's see. Now, what would Harry say here? Harry might say, No, they talk and you type. And it's when you get to that level of interaction with your characters where they're very real and they don't shut up. I mean, they're just like buzzing right now. I mean, as I'm talking to you, right over here is my computer, and my characters of my novel are chirping in my ear, and I'll be up, I guarantee you, at 3 a.m, standing in the kitchen with a legal pad, writing down as fast as I can the stuff that I'm downloading from these people talking to my head. And then I'll get up in the morning and go, what is this? And because sometimes it makes no sense because you're half asleep, but it's why you have ideas in the shower, why you wake up in the middle of the night with a great idea. You are most creative when your brain is at rest. That's a physiological fact. So these characters, once that you connect with them and you know who they are, they do talk to you, and you know what the story is going to be. And so you're foolish if you don't transcribe what it is they're saying to you. And when you are in the zone, that's what happens. So as a writer, he's sitting there writing Freddy Krueger. He's real, and you're having a great time hanging out with Freddy Krueger or Mr. T or any of these kind of iconic characters. They're very real, and it's it's a privilege, and as weird as it is, it's a real privilege to hang out with them. And that's what you do. So now that I'm doing novels, I get, instead of like a couple of weeks or a couple of months with a character, now I get a couple of years where they are in my life, and they won't shut up. I mean, they're just like, and you want to type it up. And it's weird and it's fun.
Yeah. Do you find that there's a show that you would love to have, like if you were to have continued, or let's say you get called back to do like one more episode or whatever? What's that?
One more of something?
Yeah, one more episode or whatever. Which show would it be?
A show that I never got to work on, or a show that I did work on?
A show that you did.
A show that I did. Well, probably the finest show I worked on was a show called Christie, based on Catherine Marshall's novel, which is a coming of age story. Mothers have handed this down to their daughters. It's been a bestseller twice.
I loved Christie.
It's been printed in 12 or 15 languages. Well, thank you. The novel is great, and a chance. I've been doing action adventure, television, and very often you get slotted as, you're an action person, you're a comedy person, you're this, that. Yeah. And a friend of mine, Patricia Green, very fine writer, was hired to do the pilot for that show. And she had seen enough of my work and knew me well enough to, I guess, sense that there was, something else in there that would be right for what she had in the characters are talking in her head. And I got a chance to do one of those, and that was well received. And I wound up producing the show and spending most of my time in Tennessee on location. And then 6 or 8 years later, after it was canceled on CBS, the then PAX network picked it up, and we did 3 2-hour movies as a miniseries. And I would love to be able to go back and do a fourth one of those, a fourth movie, because we had set it up in such a way, we'd advanced the characters. There were some really wonderful things happening to them and about them and around them. It would have been an honor to go back. And all the writers that I worked with, 2 other writers worked on that miniseries with me, and a bunch of the writers from the original series. It would have been fun to either have one of them write it, or write it with them, or supervise them writing it. It doesn't matter. To be able to live in the world of those characters in 1910 in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, and the issues of importance to them, the matters of the heart and spirituality and life and death and poverty and just huge things, survival. You don't get to write about stuff like that very often in primetime TV, and it was really, really cool.
Yeah, that was a beautiful show.
Sign me up. Yeah. I'm ready to go.
Okay. For anyone listening, just contact Tom, or if you don't have Tom's info, contact us, and we'll put you together.
Yeah, that's right. Put $20 million together, and we'll go make a movie.
It's just a little bit.
Me on Facebook, Tom Blomquist on Facebook, and my website is tomblomquist.com, and there's stuff about me and what I've done in my books and all of that too. So,
do you go back and watch the episodes in the series and movies and things that you've worked on?
I have a copy of almost all of them, not all of them. And no, I don't. But I do see them by accident. I have a TV right over here on my desk, and I don't really like silence. It gets to me. I like having music playing or a TV on in the background. I've always been that way, even as a kid doing my homework. And so I'll have one of these channels on, running all these old shows, and one weekend they did a marathon of Riptide episodes from when I was at the Candle Company, and I hadn't seen one of those in 20 years, and it was so fun watching them. Some that I wrote came up, and I had no recollection of writing a word of them. It's like, oh my, I wrote that? Because I often say, and by the way, that happens even when you're currently doing it, you work so intently. I do anyway. You're in the tunnel. It's very myopic. It's all consuming, and then it's shot and edited and airs, and you watch it on the air 6 weeks later, and it's like somebody broke into my house, wrote a script, left it there, and left, because I literally have had experiences where it's like I have no recollection of writing any of this. I mean, I know I did. I vaguely was aware, but I don't. Where did this come from? And because you're working so it's with such laser focus that it takes everything you have, and you're not aware of a bunch of stuff. And I don't know how my wife put up with it all those years, but because it's for me, I can't type with one hand and live life, and I can't. It's not possible.
It's consuming, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really consuming.
And
some shows more than others, and by the way, I will also say that shows that would be regarded probably by the public as more lowbrow and not as important or quality are actually harder to do, because trying to make something good out of something that is inherently, maybe not great conceptually as a series is really hard. If you take it seriously, you don't just kind of phone it in and lob one over the fence and forget about it. Shows like Christie, it was the easiest show I ever wrote because it just flowed out of me, because the characters were so real, the premise was so authentic, the themes that we were exploring were so so much gravitas, that it just came naturally. And other shows, it's a tougher haul to try to do something of quality and entertainment value with something that is kind of built in almost against you in some ways.
Sure.
I mean, I think that same kind of premise is why I kind of think back to some shows like Little House on the Prairie. There were some like really incredible episodes, or The Waltons in the Great Depression era. That they were not about the drama of the time. It was really a focus on the people themselves. And so when there's like this grounding of characters, or a grounding of who these characters are and feel very realized, to your point, it just flows. It's just good.
Mm-hmm. It's that's a really wonderful point, and it's true. It's one reason those shows have endured. I think there are plot-driven shows, and then there are character-driven shows, and there are shows that are more thematic than others. The kind of standard theme of crime doesn't pay. Okay, we've seen that, and you can do a great job with it. But when you're talking about matters of, and Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, there's another one. What a wonderful show! The depth of characters, and yes, they had compelling and interesting plots, and Pioneer Doctor and all of that. But there's something about those shows, and it's they've endured, and people that watch them on those nostalgia channels, discover them anew, and they're wonderful. And so to find those now, there's so many places to watch TV shows, new ones and reruns, that you have to kind of dig a little bit to find the ones that connect with your sensibilities.
So a little, I don't know if this is a good time for it. First of all, I wanted to share with you some of the chatter in the chat real quick.
I'm seeing it here, and I haven't been watching. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, everybody. I'm not being rude.
That's okay.
I'll put my glasses on. I'll see what you're saying. Oh, my goodness. They hate me.
Creedon said, imagine Andy Griffith's show doing War of the Worlds with Firefly cameos. And then, the feedback was, I'd absolutely watch that. And then Archer said, mix in some Farscape and it'd be damn near perfect. Don Knotts would make it so good. And then what was the hardest show you produced? Maybe why it was so hard.
Ooh, wow. That's a good one. And by the way, I got to write an episode of Farscape, and that was hard, but not the hardest. And the only reason it was hard was because it was brand new. They were still shooting the pilot when a few of us were brought in to write the initial half dozen episodes, and they didn't know yet. The network didn't know yet what the show was going to be. They loved the script, written by fabulous writer, but as they started getting deeper in the weeds, of how we're going to do it and building the sets in Australia and all the things, they started. I think there were some management changes at the network. They weren't sure how serious it was supposed to be or how comedic it was supposed to be, and that's really tough. I mean, there's a curse of writing a show in its first season because it's a moving target, and you're blindfolded and you're shooting in the dark. Sometimes. But the guys on the show, the producers, were really good guys, and we were all kind of I was a freelancer, but they were struggling trying to figure out what is the show. They know what they wanted to do, and the network thought they knew what they wanted to do, but there were changes, and it's a moving target, literally.
Sure.
So that was a tough one, but I enjoyed it because of the wonderful guys that hired me and what talented writers they were. And it was like the second time I had worked with a couple of them. Toughest show. Wow. Toughest show. Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yeah?
Really?
And the reason is it was tough because I was brought in the second season, end of the second season. I was never the guy they brought in first to run a show. I was the one they would bring in second or third after the other people didn't work out or whatever, and that's just kind of my karma, I guess. But the show had come on the air. Chuck Norris was a big movie star, obviously a sports hero and an American icon in many respects. And they were having trouble, the network felt, trying to get the traction of how to utilize Chuck Norris and his action movie persona most effectively in a weekly crime show. And there's a lot of differences in movies and TV in terms of the budget, the scheduling, and some of the concepts you can do. So they went through a couple of different showrunners. One fellow was retiring and was only going to sign on for a short time. Another one didn't work out for some personal reasons, I guess. But when I got the call, they said, we have the show and we think it should be performing at a higher level. We think Chuck is great and we like a lot of what's happening. It's just not, we think it should be a bigger hit than it is. And so the people that have been doing the show are leaving. Would you want to come on board? And I had met Chuck socially, completely by coincidence, a year or two before, and liked him a lot. He's really a cool guy. And he's Chuck Norris. And he didn't kill me, so that was good.
I was gonna say, as long as he didn't kick you, you're good.
But anyway, he's a really nice guy, and I liked him, and I thought, well, yeah, I could do this. So I went on the show, and the network executive that hired me had hired me on a few other shows and recommended me for things, and I thought the world of her. So I thought, this is something. I'd watched all the episodes before I decided, and I thought, yes, we could do something maybe more successful. And I had some kind of ground rules that I wanted, and one of them was, Chuck's an action movie star. We have to do more action. Kind of no-brainer, And they said, great, we get it. Do whatever you need to do. And that kind of permission doesn't happen very often to people like me, Dick Wolf or somebody, yes, they get to do whatever they want to do, but not me and people at my level. And they basically said, you spend what you need to spend, and we'll tell you when to stop. So we said,
wow.
Okay. So we started doing some huge movie quality action sequences. And I think we put in some really effective stories. I brought in some writers I had worked with on other shows and a couple of directors that I'd worked with on other shows. And sure enough, the ratings started to climb. But it was a lot of work. Everybody had to push together to go from here to here in the ratings. It's all about the ratings. It wasn't even so much about quality, but to get it, what are the elements the audience wants to see? What do they expect of a Chuck Norris vehicle? And what can I do to put those things in motion? And with the producers and writers and directors that I brought in, and along with some that I inherited that had already been around, everybody was into it. And boy, the action unit, the stunt guys, the fight guys, Chuck's son, Eric, was our second unit action director. Wonderful guy, good friend of mine now. And we're talking huge stunt sequences that you were not going to see on any other TV show at that time. And we blew up a whole neighborhood on one episode. 6 luxury homes blew them to toothpicks. You weren't going to see that anywhere. And that was a real thing that we actually did. And it was only because everybody was pulling together. But it was hard. It was really, really hard. That took a lot out of me.
Yeah. Wow. What, Trey? This is good radio.
Sorry, this is just bringing back memories because I actually grew up in Texas, and so when I talk about how much of a firm grasp Walker Texas Ranger had on
Texas,
basically, but particularly like Texan boys at the time, and it was just like Chuck Norris. So I'm just having a lot of very nostalgic flashbacks.
Yeah, well, and for a good reason, because he is larger than life. There's all the Chuck Norris jokes and all that fun stuff that he's a big part of that too. He's got a whole line of merchandise, I think, that he sells with a lot of those Chuck Norris jokes. But the fact is, he is such an unusual personality. That whatever he is, the 4 or 6-time world kickboxing champion, full contact karate, black belt in 3 or 4 different martial arts, 2-time national speedboat champion, movie star for 18 or 20 years. He's a very accomplished man. And this was the part that I think was the maybe the secret to Walker connecting with the audience and moving up in the ratings. When I went down to Dallas for the first time and sat and talked with them about the ideas that where I wanted to see the show go. And, we know we're not talking Shakespeare in the Park here. We're talking Walker Texas Ranger kicking ass, but within that, what's the best way to frame a character like that, and more importantly, an actor like that? And what I said was, Chuck, a lot of these guys doing movies and TV shows that are doing, martial arts stuff, they're fake. Everybody knows you could really do this stuff. You could walk in a room and kill 8 guys with your little finger if you needed to. He said, yeah. And I said, well,
he said, yeah. Of course.
Well, I'll tell you a great Chuck Norris. Remind me to tell you the Chuck Norris initiation story, because Trey, you will love this when you hear this. Anyway, but the idea is that with a guy like that, he never claimed to be Laurence Olivier, the greatest actor to ever live. He worked really hard at his acting craft and wanted to be better and really ask questions. And he wanted to be presented in an authentic way. And that worked because he's such an authentic guy. He's not pretending to be tough. He is tough. And there's a difference that audiences feel. Sometimes you look at some of these guys and it's like, he's more of a dancer than a kill me in an alley kind of guy, and all of the martial arts people are like that. And Chuck is real. So we tried to portray him in the stories more like that, a little more reluctant to get physical and violent, and than he maybe had been in previous episodes. And um, the I always used to talk to him about Gary Cooper in High Noon. The guy he's going to have to do it, and he's going to do it, and he's going to do it, and he might die doing it, but he's reluctant, and nobody will back him. And I thought, that's a hero to me. That's the kind of guy I want Walker to be, not a guy that's just first to jump into the fight. And so those are little nuancy things, but we did a bunch of those, and the ratings went up. People started picking up something else on the show. And again, it's not Shakespeare in the Park, but it's action adventure television told from a slightly different, authentic point of view, maybe is why. And sure. The story I was going to tell you is, Trey, are you sitting? Yes, you are. Okay. So this is absolute fact. When I first went down to Dallas, and I'm the new executive producer, and I'm in Chuck's trailer, big RV, motorhome, and I'm sitting there on the couch with I got my cup of coffee, and he's changing his clothes to get ready for the next scene, and we're just talking, and I'm just kind of la kind of half in the conversation and half drinking my coffee, and out of nowhere, he jumps in the air, spins around, and his cowboy boot comes this close to my face. I scream like a seventh grade girl, throw my coffee. Sorry, ladies, I didn't mean to be sexist, but I scream like a seventh grade girl seeing a mouse, and I throw my coffee, and Chuck is just roaring it. Now, all the guys in the room are all these stunt guys, and it's like, welcome to the show, Tom. And it turned out that was his initiation. I mean, literally jumped in the air, spun around like you would do, those spin kicks, and the cowboy boot is like this close to my head. Ah! And he had that kind of precision, in an inch off, he would have shattered my face, and he loved doing those kind of things because he was so precise, but he would only do something like that if you were in the club, kind of, and yeah. It was then I realized I really liked this guy. He scared the daylights out of me, but I understood a level of communication with him at that point that I would not have if had he not done that. And it wasn't initiation, and holy God, it was it was something. But that actually happened. I used to tell that story to my college students when I was teaching at Cal State Long Beach, and they all got a big kick out of it because a lot of them got a big kick out of the fact that I know Chuck and worked on the show for a while. But those are the things that you remember, and then you could build on when you're trying to accomplish a marketing goal, a commercial goal, which is how do we make this better, and how do we move forward together. I always used to say that you want to get everybody on the same train going to the same station, and on a movie or a TV show, that isn't always the case. You've got people going to different stations on different trains, and it's never going to work that way. And you have to try to corral them to a single goal, an idea, marching orders, if you will, and that's a show where it really worked. The show went from number 40 in the ratings to the top 10 in as many weeks. I mean, it was amazing, and some of it was just word of mouth that people talking around the old water cooler on
sure.
Monday morning. Hey, did you see what they did last week? That was Saturday night. Oh my! And people started watching it at the expense of our competition, which was the goal. Let's drive them into the dirt and steal their audience, which you do little by little by little by little.
It is a business.
Mm-hmm. It's a totally show business.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But that's quite an icebreaker. Yeah. To get an almost roundhouse kick to the face.
I mean, it was so. I mean, I'm telling you, he stopped with his cowboy boots with those wooden heels. Oh, but anyway, that was my Chuck story. And if he sees this, Chuck, that was hilarious. It makes me laugh even today.
That's great. Chuck Norris knows how to be a legend.
Also, Chuck Norris, we will be contacting you soon to be on the show, and you can tell us your side of the same story.
Oh dear! Oh no! Well, they did not have to clean up the couch afterwards. I'll say that. I had my dignity.
I love it.
One thing that I do have to ask is, like, when it comes to producing shows or writing a script or those sorts of things, particularly those with big names associated to their own, um, how much influence do they have over the writing process, or are they really not involved at all?
The stars,
Yeah.
they're very involved. Most of them are quite involved. You know, by the time somebody, whether they're a big name or not, by the time they're the lead on a TV series, they have arrived at a level of effectiveness and ability. They've read a lot of scripts. They've been in a lot of plays. They've been in a lot of, all of that. And they have an idea. It's them on the screen. It's not you or me. It's them. So, they know that this is them and they want to be portrayed in the most positive way they can be. Some don't care about writing as much as others, but on the set, when they're working with a director, trying to work out a scene, they don't have a lot of time on a TV series to do a lot. There's not like you have weeks and weeks of rehearsal like for a play. So they have to get to it pretty quickly, and they kind of come there with an idea. If they're well prepared, they know what they think they know what the scene's going to be like, and so they have to work that out with the director and the writing producer, who's usually on set. My show's always had a writer level, story editor or producer there to help answer questions, to kind of keep the director focused on the things that the writing staff felt the strongest about. The writers are the ones that are dealing with the network expectations, the studio. They don't call the director or the actor, they call the showrunner and maybe whoever wrote that particular script. So there should be a writer in the process to help answer those questions. But especially if a show's been on for a couple of years, they've been in these scenes, they know the stories, they have a feel for kind of why it works and what makes it work best and what they enjoy doing the most. And so they will often have a lot to say. Not like they're sitting in story meetings. Occasionally, some of them will. Michael Landon's of the world would, after work, Alan Alda, they'd be in the office till midnight with the writers working on scripts. But most of them don't. They're so exhausted they want to go home. But when a new script comes out, it usually comes out the day or two before that episode starts to shoot. So they don't have a lot of time. So you try to get together with them and read it with them aloud and answer their questions then and get their feedback then. And if they have input, that's really the time to hear it. And a lot of time that input is very insightful. And then you say, this is great. I like that. We'd go and then you go back and make adjustments. With Chuck Norris, I used to go over to his house on like Sundays, and we'd sit at his dining room table and read 2 or 3 episodes together that had just come out in first draft form. And, he'd play himself and I would play all the other characters and read the scene descriptions. And we would just, 2 of us, go through what it was we had in mind, answer questions if he didn't understand something, listen to his point of view. I would just turn a recorder on, and a tape recorder, and record the whole meeting. Then I could go back and listen to what we discussed. And out of that, a lot of times there's some really good ideas or questions that, if he didn't understand this, then the audience is not going to understand it. I got to fix this. And sometimes it would be more detailed, not a critique, but just a wishful thinking list that he would give, or a star of a show would give. And then you try to accommodate them if you can, and if not, you say, that's a really neat idea, but we're going to put that in a whole nother episode. We're not going to do that in this one. And here's why, because at that point you're collaborating, you're partners. I believe that Chuck and I were partners for the couple of years I was on that show, and other stars I've worked with on Christie. Kelly Martin was the star of the show, and she and her boyfriend came over to our house to watch one of the episodes, and after the episode, she said, I've got this idea. I don't know if I should show it to you. She was really shy. And I said, well, yeah, and she typed up like a couple of pages, and it was fabulous. It was a wonderful idea. And I said, we ought to do this. So we bought the story from her, and I wrote the episode. And I think it's one of her best performances because it was really from the heart, something she wanted to write about. And she's not a writer, so she didn't do that. Tyne Daly came to me one night on the set. We were midnight or 2 a.m. on a mountaintop in Tennessee. And she said, I have an idea. Why don't we write it together? And this is Tyne Daly. I mean, Tony Award winner, multi-award winning Tyne Daly. And I said, well, tell me the idea. And it was an amazing idea, creating a new character to bring onto the show, a Black character in this White Mountain backwards holler. And that became a role that we hired LeVar Burton to play. And I'm so proud of that script she and I wrote together, 50-50. It was really something. And then we cast LeVar Burton. I now I get to work with LeVar, become friends with him. He's a friend to this day.
That's awesome.
You cannot, when you're dealing with people of that level of accomplishment and intelligence and craft and artistry, you would be a fool to just say, well, I'm the writer. What do you know? Just say your words. I mean, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. And when you get the right people in the cast, it's a dynamic energy that's thrilling, frankly.
Yeah. So what is it about, or like at what point in the writing process do you go, yes, this is why I do what I do?
Well, that's interesting. At what point?
Or what makes you say that when you're writing?
Well, it was different on TV shows than it is with my novels.
Sure.
With a novel, the writer is the final word. You're the writer, you're the director, you're the actors, you're the scenic designer, you design the lighting and the costumes, you do everything. And so that's really satisfying when you finish it and the whole comes together, because it's a complete vision on paper. In television or screenwriting, it's different, because you're not the final word. Even if you're the showrunner, there's a network and a studio and all kinds of people that have final words, and everything is a compromise and a negotiation throughout your process. You're really happy with everything, and the show is 5 minutes or 10 minutes too long for the time slot. The network said, well, your episodes are 52:30 long. And then 3 days before it airs, they go, oh, by the way, we're going to run some public service announcements. You have 50 minutes and 12 seconds. So now you have to take that time out of your show, and it was all locked and perfect, and everybody went home. And those things happen every day on a TV series. And so when you get through that, and then you see it on the air, and you're sitting at home, and you got your glass of wine, and your family or whoever's around, and it worked, that's really cool. I mean, it's really a wonderful feeling, but there's so many things. I've often said it's amazing that anything on television is ever any good at all. Literally.
I've heard this before.
Well, I bet you have, because it's absolute fact of life. I don't care, Game of Thrones or the worst low budget piece of poo-poo, on some bad streaming service. It's amazing that anything's ever any good. Doesn't matter about the budget. Yes, you can throw money at problems, but there's so many things that can go wrong because on a TV series you're working so fast.
Sure.
On a movie, you might shoot one scene in a day. Maybe that scene take a couple of days to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
In TV, you're shooting that scene in a morning, if not two of those scenes in the morning. And so everything's moving faster, 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 faster. The actors have to work faster, the directors, the cinematographer, everybody has to really be on their best game. And there's an adrenaline rush to that, obviously. You get really into it, and it's exciting. Are you going to make the end of your day and finish all your work or not? And it becomes a badge of honor that right at the bewitching hour, you're done, and everybody finished their day's work, and they're all happy with the work they did. But it's kind of amazing, frankly, that anything's ever any good. I don't know whether it's Grey's Anatomy or whatever your favorite show is. I'm telling you, it's amazing if it works, because there's so many impediments to them doing their job. The actor is sick the day they're supposed to work. Now you have to reschedule and shoot a different scene because this actor's central to the scene and they're not going to be there for 2 days. What are you going to do? You got to keep shooting. And it's all that kind of stuff that has nothing to do with the actual quality that the audience is seeing, the story. Mm-hmm. It's just to get it. You're making something on an assembly line, and if the assembly line breaks down, you still have your delivery requirements at the end of the line. And what are we going to do now? And it's that kind of thing repeatedly, which is why I look like this. It's like, this is, I'm only 25 years old, and look at me. It's
right.
What you killed me. I'm writing novels now because I can do it by myself.
Tom, I know that we've talked fairly extensively about your work in television as a writer, producer, and all of these things, but I'm so glad that you brought up that you're also a writer. And I think and our audience would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of your latest ventures into now being an author. Can you, what inspired you to start writing some things on your own and to craft some of the novels that you've written so far?
Well, thank you for asking. It is the simple answer is, if you are in the arts, singer, costumer, writer, sculptor, banjo player, whatever it is, those itches can be scratched by other arts. I believe it all kind of comes from the same place in your brain or your heart or whatever. Certain instincts, certain whatever. So that's why you have what we call hyphenates. You have an actor, director, writer. You have a cinematographer, choreographer. You have people that have always multiple jobs. How do they do that? You had Lisa DeVita on, and how does she do all those things that she did? Because she's an artist. And so if you have a propensity for one kind of craft skill, it probably translates into some other craft. Now, writing is writing. So I found out when I was in college, I'd been writing my whole life. I didn't even realize it. I just wrote because it was fun. So I was always in the accelerated English class and that stuff in high school. I didn't know you could be a writer. Nobody told me. And I was on the school paper and, those things that you do, never thinking I'd be typing, for dollars, as they say. And so when I realized the light bulb went on at Foot Cone and Belding, I want to be the guy writing these things. Oh, now what do I do? Well, I had to start to learn the craft of screenwriting. I'd been writing, but this is a real specific craft, requirement. And it took me a long time. It took me like 10 years of doing it and trying to figure it out before I could quit all my other jobs and just be a writer. And so, so writing was my avocation. Then it became my vocation. So I got to do that in television. I got to teach it at the university level. And then, so when I was teaching filmmaking and directing and writing at college, you can't turn off the story stuff in your brain when you've been writing all these years. It just won't go away. Those guys are still jabbering back there. And I took a couple of years off. I had done 3 series in a row. I was kind of brain damaged from it. I was just like, and I asked my wife, I came home from a show. I had just actually resigned from a show at the end of a season, said, I need to just heal. I need to just be me for a while. And I asked my wife, do we have any money? She said, well, yeah, we're okay. Yeah, you've been working. I went, great. I'm going to go in my office. You come get me when we don't have any money anymore. It's kind of like almost one of those kind of conversations. And I went in my office. I thought I was going to write a play. I had always wanted to write a play. I'd never written one. And I thought, I'm just going to write something for Tom. I don't care if it's any good. I don't care if it's ever produced. It doesn't matter. I just want to write. I got to cleanse my brain of TV and TV writing and all those sensibilities. And what I started writing was a screenplay instead. Not a screenplay, a novel instead. And it became my first novel 20 years later. It was my first novel. It's called Silent Partners. It's a forensic thriller. And I don't know exactly what the catalyst for that story was, but I had been thinking about some story elements for many years. And it just all started coming out as I was writing. And I took a couple of years and got a first draft done. And it was not very good, but it was a draft. And I was happy with that. And then I went back to my TV life. And every few years, a show would get canceled and I'd be, free for a few months. And I would boot up that file and I would look at it and go, I could do better than this. So over a period of 20 years, I probably put in 5 or 6 years on this novel, learning how to write a novel, because part of the challenge for me was it's a whole different set of muscles. Even though you have characters and dialogue and story, kind of plot elements, it's a completely different kind of writing. And it's kind of like Portuguese and Spanish. They're kind of similar, but they're not the same. And they can't really understand each other except for a word here and a word there. It's like that. Writing prose, you have to kind of unlearn everything you knew about screenwriting to do it effectively. And I loved it. I every second I could go back to it. Because I came alive. Now the director in me was directing on the page, which you're never supposed to do in a screenplay. And the maybe I'm certainly no actor, but I could play all the parts because I was all those people in my head, and I could make all the decisions. And it was so fun. And so when I finally finished it, I was getting to the end I was getting ready to retire from teaching, and my wife and I were going to move to Charleston, South Carolina, where I am now, to be near our daughter. My novel was finished, and we published that, and it was really well received. And I had, talk about the satisfaction thing you asked about earlier. When you're really proud of it. I couldn't believe I got it done, and and that people liked it was kind of, for me, it was great, and great for me. And so I couldn't wait to do this again. Now I'm retired, and now I'm back to my avocation. It's no longer my vocation. I'm a retired guy. I don't play golf. I write. I'm still telling stories. I'm just doing them my way with my characters. The first one was a forensic thriller. The second one, Devious Thinking, is a revenge comedy. And it's about all the worst guys that ever did your girlfriends and friends wrong in their love lives, all rolled into one. And it was a wonderful time for me. So one's an intense psychological thriller forensic thing, and the other is this goofy caper comedy, and set in Rome of all places. And I loved hanging out with those characters, and I've spent a couple of years doing that. And as soon as that was done, I started this new one about screenwriters. So it's it's not quite Get Shorty, but it's got some of the Get Shorty flavors of a send up of Hollywood and a black comedy about what a superficial place it is, and the people often are, and but also lovingly embracing what a bunch of eccentric goofballs writers are. And so these guys are me, and my friends and composites of my friends, and nobody will know who's who, but I know who they are.
I was about to ask that. Yeah.
Nobody ever knows it's them, by the way. And nobody ever, even in TV shows. I mean, somebody would say something and they'd be so specific, and then it would turn up in a script, and they would see it, and go, "Wow, that guy was such a jerk." They go, "That was you. You said those very words." So,
Oh,
I mean, that actually happened on a show. So the actor said something one day, and it wound up in a script, and they never knew that we were literally, because they didn't see it. You're
yeah.
you're somewhere else mentally, and nobody ever knows. But these guys are composites, true composites of guys that I love, as people and as writers and as eccentric goofballs, and it's fun to be on this journey with them. That's for sure.
Sandra said, Silent Partners was my favorite. It pulled me in right from the beginning.
Well, thank you, Sandra. Thank you. Well, it's she read both of them, and she said she thought she was going to like Devious Thinking, and so she read that first, and then read the more serious one, and it does draw you in because it's psychological, and it's about Los Angeles, and I one of the fun things that I was able to do for me, hopefully it comes across in terms of authenticity, is the character. He's a medical student at UCLA, and he goes through this kind of horrific odyssey. And before I hit send on the finished one, I took a weekend and traveled all the places he travels in the story. I went to every street corner. I went to all the places, just to make sure. I had my recorder with me, and I wanted to know what they looked like. I wanted to know what they sounded like. I wanted to know what they smelled like. I wanted to just make sure that I hadn't missed something. That there still was a gas station on the corner, and there was a homeless encampment in the empty lot, and all of it. I wanted to make sure it was absolutely that there's no safety rail off the end of a cliff from a road that's windy, and right. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just me making it up, that I misremembered something. And that was, I mean, nobody in the world will ever follow this character's path through Los Angeles like I did, but I needed to do it for me. And it brought back all the stuff that he experiences in those locations.
Sure.
And, was there a fire escape on that building or not? Did I remember it right? I don't want to make it up. I want it to be, not that anybody cares, but I cared. So that was really, really fun. And I was able to see some new things and experience new things and put those in the book and then hit send. And it was, so that's where that comes from. And that's the journey. I have friends that are novelists, and they can turn one of these out in 4 or 5 or 6 months or 8 months. I don't know how they do it. John Grisham and Stephen King can just like and it comes out. Yeah. But I don't get it. That's not who I am. I am still learning how to craft a novel, as I said, which is very different than a screenplay in so many important ways. To make sure the reader goes on that experience with the character and with me, and it's very different, leaving it up to a director and a production designer and people and an actor to make those acting choices. No, I have to make those on the page. Make sure that if a person can't speak because they're flabbergasted, you have to make sure that's in there. You can't just hope the actor thinks of it, right. And so it's all inclusive, and it's like the best possible retirement for me. And Lisa DeVita, I know, is writing novels, and despite what she said about her first novel, I loved her first novel. She said, "Oh, it wasn't so good." Man, she's lying.
Yeah, she really trashed her own work there.
Lisa, lying. I told you, you're lying. It's a wonderful book, and so. This is not an exact science doing these things. Every time you do it, it's like a whole new. It's the first time anybody ever wrote a novel, and you got to start from scratch. And how am I going to do it? And what's the storyline? And what does it feel like? And so Lisa has now a different historical novel storyline she's exploring in several novels. So that's what feels different for her. It's not the quality of the writing, it's that she's tapped into a bigger, more expansive story. The world of her story is bigger, and she's drawing more directly from history than in the first novel. But the first one's wonderful. And several of my friends are all writing their first and second novels now. And it's thrilling to read their work and then see where they are and how they're solving some of these problems. But I do recommend people read Lisa, and Mary Vaughn Fent is another friend of mine who's now published her second novel. Phenomenal books, and also historical, but different, completely different for a different reason. And when you know people and you see where it's coming from, and you know them, and you see what they're accomplishing, it's almost like you wrote it. It's so satisfying,
That's
like anybody
awesome.
that's successful. You're as happy for them as you would be for yourself, right? And I am for these guys and for others.
Yeah. When you were talking about how you went back through LA to check all those places to make sure you're of your own accuracy, I was thinking about that. Like, anybody else who knows those locations or have noticed those things, that fire escape, that intersection, whatever, would know. Like, those people would.
Yeah.
But, and then Credence in the chat here said Anne Rice had people do that for Interview with a Vampire. People can be so obsessive. So yeah, like, you get a big fan base that, it doesn't even have to be big. You just get someone who gets really into it, and then next thing you know, they're following in the footsteps.
It's my second novel, and Devious Thinking. As I said, it's set in Rome, and I worked on a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie early in my career in Rome and Assisi, and was living amongst them, and all the Italian crew and all these people had made such a big impression on me. And some things happened, stories I heard, things I witnessed, things I was a part of that stuck with me. So when I started that novel, it had to take place in Rome because the inciting incident, we call it, happened there. The main character and what was going on was happening there. And so, but it had been a while since I was in Rome, and I know Rome, but I hadn't been there in a while, and it's changed. So while I was writing, in my free time, I would go online and I would boot up people's vacation videos, our trip to St. Peter's Square. And you could just watch and hear, you knew when they were there. And the people are wonderful about sharing their walking tour through, whatever, the streets of Rome. And I was able to just soak it all back up. This is what it looks like. This is how it's changed. This is what it sounds like. And it transports you as a writer back into that world. And if there was something that, the other thing that's really helpful, by the way, is Google Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
If you say somebody exits the hotel and there's a park across the street, there better be a park across the street because somebody's going to know it. And so I could go there and I could get down and you can pan the camera around and go, okay, there's the park. Okay. Oh, there's a bench over there and a fountain. Great. That scene is going to happen there. And again, 99.9% of the people don't care. But the people that do care really care a lot. And I've had people who know Rome, who, one guy said, how long did you live in Rome? I went, I was just there for a few months. Really? Oh, he said, I lived for 20 years. And, you nailed it. And well, thank you. Because
that's awesome.
I tried to there's a wonderful guy, a wonderful writer named Saul Stein. And he wrote a book called Stein on Writing. And it's kind of a Bible of writing novels. Anybody that wants to write a novel, this is the book I found, and I've now recommended it to a lot of people. He was a novelist, but he also was a senior editor at one of the big houses, like Random House or someplace, for many years. And he wrote this really clear, really good book. And the thing that was revelatory for me as a screenwriter, he said, You want to use all six senses of your reader, the sixth sense being the sense of anticipation. Now, in screenwriting, you don't do all that. It's very different. But what does it sound like? What does it feel like? Do your feet crunch on the peanut shells on the floor? All of those kind of things. You hear the water dripping, from the sink in the corner. Things you never put in a screenplay, you have to put in a novel.
Yeah.
And you have to do the right amounts and for good reasons. But so for me, the walking through LA that one last time was my last chance to get those details right. And for Rome, absolutely. I needed anybody that was Italian to know any Italian language things, cultural things were authentic, that I wouldn't insult them somehow. I had consultants. There's also a section in the French Riviera. And so two friends of mine who are French-speaking French Americans read it separately to make sure I got the small cultural references in France right. And the same thing with Italy. Two people separately are Italian Americans and not only fluent, but they still have a love and a feel for the nuances of their culture. And I didn't want to make some stupid American guy mistake, when it's so fixable by just simply doing the homework and doing the work.
Wise. Sorry.
No, I was going to say the same thing. Because I've known a few people who have been those people on that side of the keyboard who have painstakingly broken down entire novels, and they're like, well, this is wrong, this is inaccurate, this is wrong, this is inaccurate. And I'm like, you're missing the point. Like it's not to be pedantic, it's to get lost in the story. And they're like, no, it has to be right.
Well, look, when I would hear these things about TV shows or movies, and certainly novels, my response is simply, these are not documentaries. These are fictions. They're entertainments. So whether it's Walker, Texas Ranger or Christie, they're not documentaries. There are licenses that you take, but you try to get the important things right, and you want the feel of authenticity. And the same thing with a novel. It's not a nonfiction documentary, book about, life in Rome. It's a story about people in Rome, and is it the textures? Does it feel like it ought to feel? And if it does, then you succeeded. If somebody's taking that kind of time to pull things apart and critique it, then they need to get a life. Because why would you do that? Okay, you can't really beam somebody up from a spaceship to a planet and not, but you know what? The license says those are the rules of the thing. So go with it. Somebody said that's the rule. You go with it. It's called Star Trek. It worked really well in a whole bunch of Star Trek stories. So, you try to get, by the way, I wrote an episode of Star Trek Next Generation, and the Bible that we got, the Gene Roddenberry Bible, the rules of the universe that they were trying to work from. I mean, it was how the phasers worked and how he had everything figured out of how it worked. It's the operation manual for the Starship Enterprise. And it was like this thick, and it was all the drawings, the architectural renderings, and where the elevators were and how stuff you never would need to know, except if you're writing and you need to know it. And the idea was you read this, you absorb it, you watch the episodes, you connect with their world, the rules of their world, and then you tell the best story you can within those rules. And unfortunately, mine was a backup script, and the show didn't continue, and so that one didn't get made. But it was such an honor to read these documents, and I think you can go to bookstores now and buy a lot of those documents that have been pirated and sold. But but it's the rules of the world of the story. We're all about world of the story, and is the world, does it feel authentic? Did you really go the extra distance to do the work? but they're not documentaries. I mean,
Right.
just people get a little maybe carried away, and well, he would never drive that car. Well, you know what? In this story, he does. Come on,
Right.
It's shaken, not stirred. Oh, what do you mean? He didn't do it that one. He drank a beer in that one. Okay, guess what? He drank a beer in that one. But people get hung up. I know they get a little crazy.
When characters resonate with somebody so much, I think it really confounds them when they decide to do something different. Kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, of they have an expectation of the way that a character acts or way that a character moves, or kind of those plot beats that you've got. So to them, I say, I understand where you're coming from with that, but also don't miss the point of the story, like you were just saying. It is very much about the story.
Yes.
Tom, I have got to say, this has been an incredible time with you here today. I was not expecting so much breadth, and for us to spend such an extensive time about how much you had with television and that sort of thing. And I knew you had such a backstory with that, but the stories that you brought forth from that were incredible. You have such a prolific career, and I think that our audience is going to be very, very happy, just like our producer Sandra has been, with engaging with your new art form of writing novels.
Thank you.
I have to really thank you. This has made my inner childhood that much better.
Well, first of all, it's so cool to hear that, and I know you mean it, and I can see it in your eyes. That it's as I said at the very beginning of this, people that do art, singing, costumes, whatever, we love talking about what we do, what we love, and you would talk for 90 minutes about any one of those things, the shows you've been in, and artists you admire, whatever. And so it's fun for me because I know some of these shows are important to people because they grew up on them, and I grew up on them as a writer. I grew up as a kid writer in my 20s working on some of these shows, and it was just so cool to write these stories, work with these other. Half of my joy was the people I wrote with and worked for, and the dynamic energy. So thank you for just a chance to talk about some of this stuff. A lot of people don't care about some of these shows anymore, but they meant something to me. And there's something about having 30 or 40 million people at one time back in those days watch what you did. It's amazing, to know that 30 or 40 million people watched, gave you an hour of their life to watch something that you wrote. And it's a true privilege. And that anybody picks up one of these books and reads it and says, "Oh, I got to hand it off to my brother-in-law because he loves these." It's so satisfying, and so fun to see your eyes light up. We're talking about Chuck Norris. It's like, oh my God, I'm a 10-year-old boy again. And it's
right.
Great. I get it. I totally get it. And by the way, he wouldn't let you down. There's an old adage: you never want to meet your favorite movie star because they'll probably be disappointing to you because you have them as such inflated expectations. They're not really. Chuck is who you thought he was and who you think he is. He's a really good guy.
That's great.
And so I get a kick out of that one reaction alone. It cracks me up. So.
I do have a question that I didn't want to miss asking. I even wrote it down so I wouldn't forget.
Uh-oh.
A little bird told me that you might be in a rock band.
Oh, yes. I was. I played drums in high school. I was in a band in the Chicago area called the Shandells, and we made a record and played a lot of the high schools and local colleges, and it was a pretty popular band. The other band at my high school was really popular. It was the Shadows of Night. They did Gloria, the big garage band hit. So the Shadows and the Shandells were the two bands in the area. and that was really fun. And we had our own. The Shadows played at the Cellar, which was their club in Arlington Heights. We had our own place called the Chandelier, and Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes played during our breaks for free at our club, because Ted went to St. Viator's, the Catholic school right up the road, and so it was a very fertile music environment. A lot of really good bands and good musicians came out of there, out of the northwest suburbs, and so I did that. I played all the way through college. I pretty much paid for my college education playing drums in different bands and rock groups and jazz groups and whatever. And in Los Angeles, I played in a group, an oldies band called Midlife Crisis. And it's a bunch of old guys like me who used to do this when we were kids for a living. And we had, one of the members from Buffalo Springfield, was, playing with us, and some really great people. And it's a joy that I'm kind of sad that I don't have at the moment. Now that we're still kind of new to Charleston, I'd like to find a band, a bunch of old guys that want to play some of the oldies, and I'd love to do that. And when in Midlife Crisis, we never charged anybody. We always played charities and stuff, and just did it for free for the joy of it. Again, it's just art, and I would like to find that again. That's a piece of the puzzle that's not in place yet. Now that I'm in the Low Country, but that'll come. Ultimately, I'll stumble onto a bunch of guys that want to do this, and there's a lot of live music in this city, and there's a lot of room for, I think, a bunch of old guys that, like us. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was going to say, I used to live in South Carolina, and I was thinking about who I might know in Charleston. But I actually don't know anyone in music in Charleston, so. Yeah. But otherwise, go ahead.
And a lot of the ones that are doing this are really trying to do it. They're touring, and they're doing download music and going to Nashville, trying to get major label deals. And I don't want to do that. I just want to play, once a week and drink some beer and have some fun with some guys that,
Yeah.
I met somebody recently, and he was talking about, we should get a Beach Boys band together and play all the Beach Boys songs. And hey, I've already got my shirt. I'm ready to go. So I said, if you could find some guys that know how to play and can sing and do those kind of cool harmonies, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'd play Beach Boys stuff all day long if I could. That'd be great. Who wouldn't love that? So,
yeah. Well, when you do, we'll come see you for sure.
Thank you. Go on location with your show.
That'd be so cool. We've wanted to do that really bad. Do like a tour of live shows.
By the way, where in South Carolina were you from? Where were you?
I lived in Rock Hill, so just south of Charlotte.
Mm-hmm. Know it? Yes, absolutely. Well, we love Charleston, I'll say that. So.
And that's where I met Trey, too.
Really?
Yeah, because he's still in that area.
Oh.
Yeah. I actually went to high school, not in Charlotte, but I went to high school down in Myrtle Beach. And so I'm very familiar with this area.
Well, wonderful. Well, hope you guys get through here sometime. I'll go to lunch or something. That'd be fun.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we'd love to have you back. Sorry, Trey.
I'll just stay all night. I'll just sit here and sit up, sleep in my chair, and yes.
We'll do it. Well, we'd love to have you back, though. Yeah.
It'd be fun to do. Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank you.
Not to put you on the spot. Not that we're live or anything. If we're
ever Dare you ask me? No, it was great. Of course, I'd love to do it. Absolutely. And thanks, Sandra, very much for all of your work getting me here. That was very thoughtful.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. She did a great, and for reading my books and liking them. That's awfully nice to hear.
Well, can we have a shout out for our producer, Sandra? I don't think that we say enough how much we love and adore and respect Sandra for the work that she does. So here's a shout out for you, Sandra.
Absolutely.
So Tom, to you, I say thank you again, just 1,000 thank yous. My last question to you before we transition out today is, for anyone that's maybe looking to get into either producing or writing or really anything with the creative arts, what advice do you have for them?
Wow, that's a great question. The simple answer is start doing it. You can make a movie with this iPhone, and in the old days you had to have crews and money and whatever. If somebody wants to, well, I'll say, be a filmmaker, a writer, a director, actors, you find people like-minded, put a story together, even a short story, and shoot it and learn about camera angles and editing, and show it to people and put it in local film festivals and whatever, and start getting feedback. That's the short answer. The longer answer is you don't need a college degree to be a filmmaker, to be in any of the film crafts, to be a crew member in the art department, costumes. You don't have to have a degree in that. You go to the local theater, you start volunteering, learning about lights, learning about sound, learning about costumes, learning about props. Go to local film school, where filmmakers are always dying to have crew members and they don't have any money, and you're willing to work for free, and you'll carry Apple boxes around and whatever. To be around it, to learn and absorb what they're doing, then can inform your decisions of where you might want to take it. You don't have to be in Los Angeles, that's for sure. It used to be, but now you don't. You can be in any number of cities, Atlanta, Albuquerque, Savannah, all over the place, Vancouver, Toronto. There are a lot of places making superior product. And then, of course, there are film schools, and there's trade schools where you can go and learn some craft like editing or cinematography. Take a couple of classes, night classes, an extension class in writing. I taught at UCLA Extension when I first started teaching, one night a week. A bunch of adults. I had two doctors, a lawyer, a talk show producer, a female firefighter. I had all these different people. There were adults who wanted to be screenwriters. They want to learn how to, and some of them were really good. And they came once a week and they brought their work, and we talked about it. And I tried to guide them to sharpen their professional level competitive skills so they could be successful in the marketplace. A couple of them turned out to be very successful, and they're producing hit shows right now.
Cool.
So it can be done. You don't have to go to NYU Film School or any of that stuff. It's nice if you want to do that, but you can learn a lot of this and online. There's all kinds of how to do this stuff on YouTube, and you can watch videos and absorb. And if you can connect with a couple of people that want to maybe try it too, you can help each other with your scripts, and you can help each other shooting what you're shooting and try to figure out where you made mistakes and build from there. Because ultimately, all of this takes practice. Any craft takes practice, and nobody sits down to write a great novel or do a brilliant sculpture that's going to be in the Louvre, the first time out. It takes a while. And so you can do it on the weekends with your friends, and just put it up on YouTube, start a channel, see if you can get a following, and all the things that people do, and go to local film festivals and see what everybody else is doing, and meet the filmmakers and talk to them about what they did that you like so much, and maybe you could be a part of the next one. And you start building a Rolodex, we used to call them, but a list of people that, well, he's got a good camera, and she's really good with this, and he's really good with that, and I don't know what that person's good at, but I like them. Let's get them involved, and you find some actors and do something, and the opportunities are endless in this era because of the technology and all the platforms, and like when I was when I finished my first novel, I wanted to do something to promote the novel. So what would I do? I got a bunch of my former students together and hired some actors and shot a movie trailer for the book. It's like it's a big movie, but there's no movie. It's just the trailer. But I wanted people to be able to see it. People could see that at my tomblomquist.com, by the way.
I saw it. Yeah.
It's just so
I did watch them. Yeah.
It looks like a big movie, you know, and I called my friends and put something together that would kind of show people what the story's like. The same thing with the Goofy novel with Devious Thinking. I did about 6 or 7 short, silly commercials to try to convey the tone of that novel, which is very different than Silent Partners. Mm-hmm. And people started sending them to me. Bella Shaw, who was one of the anchors on CNN originally, in the original CNN, on her own wrote and shot. She put on old lady makeup and she shot a commercial for my book and sent it to me, and it knocked me out. And I added some music and put it up there, and everybody's had a lot of fun just doing little stuff like that. And so that's the long answer to somebody. Well, what do I do? How would I start? Well, you can do something silly like that. You just and then if it works, it works. If it doesn't, somebody will tell you why it didn't work, and maybe you redo it, and so forth.
And grow. Yeah. And you don't need permission.
Boy, you do not need. Well, actually, they do. They have to call you guys and get permission from you.
But we will give it.
They have their own show because they have to get your permission. They should know that. No, of course, you don't need permission. And I think you used the word guts earlier. You need a little bit of willingness to stumble and fall, you know, like the first time you rode a bike when you were a kid and all of that. You know, you have to, at some point, stumble and fall. And my first writing efforts, I really tried to do it. And I said it took like 10 years. And I was writing every day. And I would go to a writer I admired and I'd say, here's what I have. And he said, yeah, Thomas, nice try. Keep trying. You know, and it broke my heart. I thought, oh, I've let him down. I'm no good. He was doing the kindest thing in the world, which was go back and try it again. What's wrong with it? Just do it again. You know, you'll find it. You'll find it. You'll find it. Ultimately, I found it, and I was able to hire him as a writer on some of my shows, and one of the best writers in Los Angeles. And I admired him so much. His name is Jim Burns, by the way. And you know, he wasn't going to tell me a bunch of foo-foo, you know, you're great, what a genius. No, he was like, no, you're not there yet. Keep trying. And I was determined to please him because I admired him so much. He was a story editor on Gunsmoke, and he created How the West Was Won, and he wrote a lot of TV movies. This guy was an icon to me, certainly, and a lot of other writers. And he did the kindest possible thing, which was, nope, try it again. And I did, and I kept doing it. And he would always read it. Yeah, a little closer, but not there yet. You know, and he just like, I gotta get this. I gotta prove it to him. And I did ultimately, but it took 10 years.
I remember some of the things like when I first started sewing, and I mean, I bring up the fact that Emily helped me with a lot with like my early projects of things and would give me advice, and I'd bring her things, and she kind of sometimes would cock her head to the side and be like, how did you do that? And and so then we would sit and then we would kind of dissect it and be like, okay, so do you see this like ripple here, like this? It looks like the top part of the fabric did this, or she'd point out something like, it looks like your stitch length is maybe a little too long here. Getting that constructive criticism, it's not meant to tear you down. It is always with the intention to make it better, as long as the intention is to make that other person better. There are going to be people out there who are going to want to cut you down because they recognize your talent,
Oh, yes.
and they don't want to see you succeed. But those that are willing to point out the flaws, but in order to help you make it better, those are the people to hold on to. And those are
Well,
the people to make lifelong friends with.
and we all want it to be right the first time, even now, when my first draft novel, it's like, I just want it to be right. Well, it's not right. I know it's not right. And I'll send it to a writer friend or two, and they'll go, this sucks. And here's what you missed. Because you writing at this level with all these years of writing, you don't have any objectivity. You're creating it, and you try to maintain your objectivity, but you get so far inside of whatever it is. It doesn't have to be. You could be, crocheting doilies. It doesn't matter, because you're inside it, and it's very hard to step aside. That's why Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and Francis Ford Coppola always screen their movies for each other privately before they show anybody else. Mm-hmm. So literally, I mean, you imagine Steven Spielberg in a screening room with these two giants watching his movie alone in a room, and they'll tell him what they really think. And legend has it they give each other, profit participation in each other's movies, because they know they're getting the top level, pure, Steven, that shot's too long. I'd cut it shorter. I hate that. Don't you have another take of that? I mean, they're able to say that to each other in a way that nobody else could or would dare to do. And everybody needs someone to objectively critique, support, modify, nurture what we're trying to do. It's not an exact science. It's not like you add this and this and this and poof, you have something great. It's not like that at all. There's a million variables, including you wishing don't make it so sometimes, and you wish, and it's not. And it's I with my novels, I have like 3 people that I send my books to. One of them is a former TV writer and a novelist now himself, and another is a retired sitcom writer. He now is a playwright, one of the funniest men to ever walk the planet, and I admire his writing so much. And the third is my wife, who looks at this stuff and isn't a writer at all. And so I get objective, totally different kinds of feedback from these people. And then if I need, I have a book editor that I hired to look at my work, and she was a colleague at Cal State Long Beach and is a screenwriting teacher and a clinical therapist, which I need probably badly, and she's there to help me. But she has wonderful insights into the human behaviors and emotions, and a talented writer, and so she's really thorough. I wrote a textbook years ago with another professor on film directing, and she was our editor on that. And it was amazing what she brought to our work. There's a PhD senior college professor and me, and with all my industry experience doing this book on how to make movies. And Bonnie Blackburn is her name, and she's extraordinary. And that's why I have her doing my novels, and because she'll tell me what, even if it's some stupid punctuation mistake that I should know better. Tom, where did you go to school? Sorry, but it is very, very gratifying, even though you're going to get slapped around a little bit by your evaluators. It's really gratifying because you're getting the real information. And then what happens is, while they're reading it, you've regained some of your objectivity. Then you get their notes, and it's light bulb moments going off all the time. Oh, how did I not see that? Oh, wait, I'm missing a character here. Or this scene ought to be here, or you're missing a scene is a common thing. You went from A to B to E. It's like, wait a minute, and somebody that, you're missing a scene. Oh, you're right. And I thought I saw the scene in my head, but I guess I didn't type it up. But those are the things that the writers at the round table, in New York, and at Lane's restaurant, Woody Allen, all these guys, you sit around and give each other notes on their work. And it's really an important part of the process. And no one should be afraid to have someone give them critical judgment. And what you don't want is to only give it to your close friends who will tell you what a genius you are, because that's useless.
Right. It's not about the ego stroke. It's about
you need objective, and informed and supportive notes. And not somebody to just go, "Oh, bravo, you're a genius. You're the greatest unknown." No.
We tell ourselves that enough, right?
Well, we do. We do. Everybody does. And if you don't think that Stephen King, has an editor or somebody in his life that goes, "Stevie, baby, you lost it, bud."
Stevie, baby.
Stevie, baby. That's an Asian talking.
When we have him on one day, we are going to use that.
Anyway, but everybody has people that do this for them and with them, and sometimes you have to pay for that that feedback, and other times you have friends or teachers, that are in those kind of mentor supportive positions, and they do make a big difference to us, the people that do this. If you're going to do it for a living, is especially crucial, because I don't want somebody to buy my book if the book is not ready,
Right.
We've all seen those. It's like, it's lame, it's really embarrassing. It's like, oh my God, I paid for this. This is horrible. What, didn't they show it to somebody first? And,
right. Where was the editor?
Where was the editor, or just anything, and everything is not for everybody, but there's a certain pride. If somebody's going to put their paintings in an art gallery, they pretty much need to know that the paintings are gallery worthy, and it's not some pretend, thing. So,
and I think that's incredible, like, advice for really anybody, is to have those people in your life that are willing to give you that constructive feedback. And if all you're getting is praise from everyone, seek some other advice. So get into your local community, learn from others in the business, get familiar with that, start building your network, and then make sure that you've got a wide circle of people that are giving you consistent feedback. I think that is excellent, Tom. Again, thank you so much for being on today. As we close out this episode here, please go to support Tom and all of the amazing things that he is doing. His 2 books are out currently. You are able to purchase those. I did believe that I saw that on Amazon earlier, but you can find. You can find his books wherever you acquire and obtain your books. This episode, along with probably every other episode, always and forever, is going to be is in memory and made possible because of Joe Capone, our moderator, fellow comedian, critic, encourager, and great friend. You can find us pretty much wherever you tune into podcasts. For updates, announcements, and more, please follow us on social media under Modern Romantic. We want to say thank you, everybody. Have an A-team day.
And and you don't need permission.
No, you don't. No.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.